All right, today we're going to dive into the finite math of Bitcoin. And to kick things off, I want you to try a little thought experiment with me. This is really going to get to the heart of what makes Bitcoin's scarcity, well, so unique.
So yeah, go ahead, close your eyes for just a second and really imagine this. You're holding an asset.
It's an asset that is so incredibly scarce.
That only about 2.5% of the entire planet could ever own the amount you're holding. So what could that possibly be?
A sprawling mansion? A rare supercar? Nope, it's just zero point 0.1 Bitcoin. And today, I'm going to prove it to you with some simple math. No hype, just the cold, hard numbers.
So by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why Bitcoin is capped at 21 million, you'll know precisely how many people could ever own that 0.1 BTC, and we'll even figure out what a global fair share of Bitcoin actually looks like. And trust me, once you see this math, you are never going to unsee it.
Okay, let's start with the foundation, Bitcoin's hard-coded limit. You know, the entire system is built on this really simple but powerful idea. You just can't print more.
In the contrast here is just stark, right? With normal money, central banks can fire up the printers whenever they want. Now, this can be useful, but it means the supply is always expanding. Then you've got Bitcoin's approach. The supply is fixed, locked in at 21 million, and not by a person or some committee, but by the code itself. It is literally impossible to print more.
The system also has this kind of built-in brake pedal called the halving. Think of it like a gold rush, right? In the early days, it's easier to find gold, but as time goes on, it just gets harder and harder. With Bitcoin, new coins are created as a reward for miners, but about every 4 years, that reward gets sliced in half. This means the flow of new supply is designed to shrink over time, making Bitcoin scarcer and scarcer.
So all of this stuff, the predictable supply, the finite limit, how hard it is to produce, this is why you always hear Bitcoin called digital gold. You can't just wish more into existence. So just how scarce is this digital gold? Well, let's get into the math that really puts it all into perspective.
Okay, now let's talk about what I like to call the 2.5% club. We're going to calculate the real scarcity behind that number I mentioned at the start.
So let's answer a very specific question. What is the absolute maximum number of people on planet Earth who could ever own 0.1 Bitcoin?
The math here is actually super simple. We just take the total supply, 21 million Bitcoin, and we divide it by 0.1. We're using 0.1 Bitcoin here because it's a nice tangible number to work with for this thought experiment.
And the answer? 210 million. That's it. In a completely perfect world where every single Bitcoin is available, a maximum of 210 million people could ever own just 0.1 Bitcoin.
Now let's actually visualize that for a second. This massive bar on the left, that's the current world population, about 8.3 billion people. And that tiny little bar on the right, that's our 210 million potential owners. The difference is absolutely staggering.
So 210 million people out of 8.3 billion is, just over 2.5%. That means only 2.5% of the world can ever join the 2.5% club. To put that into perspective, if you're in a room of 100 people, we're talking about maybe 2, 3 of them, max.
And you know, in reality, that number is actually smaller. Over the years, countless Bitcoin have been lost for good. Forgotten passwords, destroyed hard drives, people passing away without sharing their access. This means the true available supply is less than 21 million, which makes the real percentage even lower than 2.5%.
All right, now let's look at this from a totally different angle. Let's calculate your global fair share. What if we took every single Bitcoin that will ever exist and just divided it equally among every single person on the planet? So this setup is similar. We take the total supply, 21 million Bitcoin, and we divide it by the current world population of 8.3 billion people. So what does each person get? The answer is about 0.0025 Bitcoin. That tiny little fraction, that's what a perfectly equal global share of Bitcoin looks like. It is a very, very small number.
And this is where it all clicks. This illustrates the point brilliantly. If you own 0.1 Bitcoin, you hold nearly 40 times the global fair share. So no, owning 0.1 Bitcoin is not a small amount. Mathematically, it's an enormous outlier.
Okay,
So after all that mind-bending math, it's time for a really important reality check. It is absolutely crucial to understand that scarcity, well, it isn't a guarantee of anything.
And I want to be crystal clear about this. Scarcity alone doesn't mean the price is going to go up tomorrow. Bitcoin is famous for being incredibly volatile. The price can crash hard, and it can go sideways for years. The most important rule of all is to never ever risk money you can't afford to lose. This is all about understanding the math, not making any kind of financial prediction.
So, if you remember nothing else from all this, just remember these 3 things. 1. Only about 2.5% of the world's population can ever own 0.1 Bitcoin. 2. If it were shared equally, each person's share would be a tiny 0.0025 BTC. And 3, therefore, owning 0.1 BTC isn't just not small, it is, by definition, mathematically rare.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. If this finite math really holds true, what does it actually mean when people talk about stacking sats, accumulating those tiny fractions of a Bitcoin for the future? Is it just a way to secure a piece of a truly scarce asset? Or is it something else entirely? That's a question for you to ponder.